at this point, we have acknowledged that June 30th is a deadline. It's still a deadline that we're operating against. I certainly would rule out the possibility that, much like what happened earlier this spring, that these are negotiations that could spill over the deadline by a couple of days. But at this point, we're not planning any sort of longer-term extension.
The final phase of nuclear negotiations with Iran are about to get underway. Iranian leaders are, as usual, tossing about as much spitting rhetoric as they possibly can about hate for America. But it would seem the shots are far from one-sided. In a letter that has just gone public, the Director of National Intelligence has labeled Iran the leading state sponsor of terrorism, calling both the regime and Hezbollah the single most important factors keeping the Syrian dictator in power. It leads to once again ask the question, why are we seeking to walk lightly around a nation that we understand is prepared to do nothing more than kill whomever they can that does not agree with them? Our guest is Director of Policy at the Jewish Policy Center in Washington, D.C., Gabriel Scheinmann. Gabriel, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
You wrote an interesting op-ed, and I want to get right to it because you pointed out 4 things that we need to understand if we're okay with the deal. And I want to go to the last words that you put in there. To support the deal, one must simply believe. Well, Gabriel, aren't we supposed to believe all our leaders that everything is perfect, everything's wonderful, and we've got this right where we want them?
I wouldn't know which words to believe. I mean, even the Obama administration has changed what it's publicly demanded that Iran do to comply with such a deal, going, if you want to go back 3 years ago, a year ago, 6 months ago, or a week ago. Just last week, Secretary of State Kerry said that Iran does not have to come clean on the possible military dimensions of its nuclear program. This has been a long-standing U.S. demand. The president has long demanded that we have access to anytime, anywhere inspections of all Iranian nuclear sites, including military sites. And yet, right now, just today, you have a former senior State Department and White House official saying, you know what, that's maybe a bridge too far and we don't really need it. So in order to support a deal, you really truly must believe rather than actually verify in fact.
And there's that word verify again that has always come up so much. It has come up in past transgressions before. Trust but verify. We have that in our military history as well. You brought up a couple of things that I think we've even talked about here on the show before. For instance, you have to believe that this would strengthen the hands of more moderate leaders in Iran. All right, let me stop right there. What sort of evidence do we have of any kind that there are moderate leaders in Iran who are ready to grab power, who are willing to do it, and would then be able to use this as a linchpin? I can't find any.
We don't have any evidence of moderates of Iran in the regime. And in the American context, when we think of moderates, we think of, I don't know, maybe a pro-gun Democrat or a pro-gay marriage Republican. In Iran, the term moderate doesn't exist in the lexicon of the regime. There are definitely moderates in the people, but they are suppressed. In the regime, this administration, this regime, the Rouhani administration, is considered a moderate by the president. This is an administration that has upped executions by 50% compared to the previous administration, which we have all universally declared to be one of the most hate-spewing, anti-Semitic, anti-American personas that the world has ever known. So it's sort of a joke that we think, that the administration thinks, that this deal has moderates on the other side of it, that this deal will strengthen them, and that this deal will moderate the regime's behavior, both in its support for terrorism and support for the ethnic cleansing done by the Assad regime, but also in its desire for nuclear weapons.
Is one of the most incomprehensible things in all this is to believe that the Obama administration, seeing what we have seen and learning what we've learned in the last couple of months, can detect and punish Iranian cheating. They seem to cheat on a whim, and we're always, at the moment, going, wow, we didn't know that. We're shocked.
And even beyond that, the 2 biggest Iranian nuclear sites, the Natanz site and the Fordow site, the only reason they were revealed to us is because of Iranian opposition intelligence and those of our intelligence services years after they were constructed. I mean, those are the 2 biggest pieces of the Iranian nuclear program, and it's not as if the Iranians told us about them. We had to go and find them through our own capabilities. So to think that even whatever the final parameters of the inspections and verifications measures that are included in this deal, even to think that at that point that we were able to know transparently everything that is there. I mean, Secretary Kerry made a comment last week referring to the possible or previous military dimensions of the program that we have absolute knowledge of everything they've done. If we have absolute knowledge of everything they've done, there's no need for inspections.
I got about 30 seconds left then. Why then are no enemies and opponents of the president, those who understand everything we've talked about here, simply say out loud to the president, Mr. President, you're lying to us. We can catch you in those lies, and why do we still allow them to continue then, Gabriel?
I mean, there have been a lot of people who oppose this deal that have spoken out loudly. I mean, the Israeli government and the Israeli people, frankly, the Israeli government on both sides, both the opposition and the ruling government, are united on this. Congress has time and again, not only Republicans, but a good number of Democrats, expressed deep skepticism about the concessions the administration appears to be making for this deal. Our other allies in the region, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Egypt, Jordan, there are many who, and even the French. I mean, the French foreign minister a couple times this week has said that they're not willing to sign a deal that doesn't involve very strict verification
And
measures.
it is
so
just amazing
there's a lot
that
of angst there.
We continue to go back and forth. It always comes back to the same thing. It doesn't add up, no matter how you slice it. Gabriel Scheinmann, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it. Coming up next, the GOP fallout from a week many would just as soon forget on the fastest 60 minutes of news.